If you'd asked me 2 years ago, I would have told you my marriage was solid. Not perfect, but solid. Eric and I had been together for 10 years, had a 7-year-old daughter, Sophie, and a life that looked good on paper. We had our routines, pancakes on Sundays, movie nights on Fridays, and the kind of quiet stability that people mistake for happiness. I honestly thought that was love. Turns out, sometimes, stable is just another word for asleep. It started with a text. Eric got an invitation for his college reunion. He was thrilled, talking about it like a teenager prepping for prom. "It'll be fun to catch up," he said. "See how everyone turned out." I remember laughing and telling him, "Try not to look too successful, it might kill their confidence." He grinned, kissed my forehead, and promised not to party too hard. The night of the reunion, he left wearing his old leather jacket, the one I bought him years ago, back when we still bought gifts instead of things we needed. I didn't think much of it. I made popcorn, watched a show, went to bed around 11. He came home at 1:30. The moment he walked in, something felt off. He smelled like whiskey and a woman's perfume. Something floral, expensive, not mine. I looked up from the couch, and he froze like a teenager caught sneaking in after curfew. "Hey," he said too casually. "It ran late." And percent. I smiled, trying not to sound suspicious. "Good time?" He nodded, eyes on the floor. "Yeah, saw a bunch of people, caught up." Then he took his phone, screen down, and went straight to the shower. When he came out, I was pretending to read. He leaned over, kissed my hair, and said goodnight. But I noticed his hands were shaking. At 2:07 a.m., his phone buzzed. A message flashed across the screen before it went dark again. "It was so good seeing you again, E. You haven't changed at all." Oh! I remember staring at that letter, E. Not Eric, just E. The kind of nickname that only comes from history. The next morning, I didn't say a word. I made coffee, packed Sophie's lunch, and watched Eric act like everything was normal. I asked about the reunion just to test him. He said, "It was great catching up with old friends, especially Lauren Kent. You remember her?" Of course, I remembered Lauren. The one who sent him a handwritten letter at our wedding, wishing him all the happiness he deserves. I'd always thought it was sweet until that moment. "Yeah," I said. "I remember." He smiled, not realizing the way my stomach turned when he said her name. For the next few days, he was different. Too different. He started humming in the shower, smiling at his phone, dressing sharper for work. I asked, jokingly, "Who are you trying to impress?" He said, "Maybe I just don't want to look like someone's dad all the time." Funny thing is, he was someone's dad. Mine. Ours. Sophie's. 3 nights later, he came home late again, said he'd been stuck at the office. He showered immediately, just like before. When I went to put his clothes in the hamper, I found a restaurant receipt in his pocket. 2 entrees, 1 bottle of Merlot, 1 dessert. The name on the check. The Veranda, a romantic restaurant by the river. The same one where he took me for our anniversary the year before. I didn't confront him that night. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat in the dark, and thought about how betrayal doesn't scream, it whispers. It hides behind half smiles and words like, "just dinner," and "old friends." The next morning, Sophie ran into the kitchen, holding a drawing. "Look, Mommy, it's us. You, me, and Daddy." She pointed to 3 stick figures, all smiling, holding hands. I swallowed hard, smiled, and told her it was beautiful. Eric walked in, kissed her head, and left for work like nothing was wrong. Later that day, Maya, my best friend since college, and now a family lawyer, called just to chat. I told her about the reunion, the perfume, the text, the receipt. She went quiet for a few seconds and said, "Rachel, you need to stay calm. Don't react yet. Just observe. Cheaters get sloppy when they think they've already won." That sentence stayed in my head all day. When Eric came home that night, he said he was tired, that work was stressful. I asked him about the restaurant receipt. He blinked once, then said, "That was just a client dinner. You don't trust me?" I didn't answer. I just looked at him long enough for him to look away. He went upstairs, and I heard the shower again. That same rhythm of guilt disguised as cleanliness. I sat on the couch, phone in hand, heart oddly steady. Because that's when it hit me: the moment you stop denying the truth, the pain becomes data. And data, at least for me, is something I know how to use. If you've ever found out someone you love might be lying, tell me in the comments what was the moment you just knew something was wrong. I read every single one. And if you like stories about cheating, revenge, and quiet justice, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. That night, I couldn't sleep. The sound of the shower stopped. Eric came downstairs, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "Love you." I smiled, eyes closed, and said, "I know." But for the first time, I didn't mean it. The next morning, I stood by the window, watching Eric's car pull out of the driveway. The taillights disappeared into the gray Portland drizzle, and I couldn't tell if what I felt was anger or relief. Maybe both. I cleaned the kitchen just to keep my hands busy. Dishes, counters, even the coffee machine I scrubbed like I was trying to erase the night before. By noon he texted me, "Lunch meeting. Don't wait." Short, efficient, no heart emojis, no "love you." That was new. Over the next week, he got better at being distant. He started leaving early, coming home late, claiming traffic or deadlines. He'd put his phone face down at dinner and keep it within reach like it was an oxygen tank. If I asked who was calling, he'd smile and say, "Just work, babe." I wasn't born yesterday. One night, while he was in the shower, I picked up his phone. I didn't even plan to. It was sitting there, screen lighting up with a preview of a message. "Still thinking about our conversation last night." No name, just a gray bubble. I pressed my thumb against the lock screen out of pure instinct. It didn't unlock. He'd changed his passcode. When he came out, I was sitting on the edge of the bed, holding the phone in my lap. "You changed your password," I said quietly. He froze for a moment. "Yeah. Work's been crazy. It said it's safer." "Safer from who? Your wife?" He laughed a little too loudly. "Come on, Rachel. Don't be paranoid." Paranoid. The classic word men use when they've run out of lies. He turned off the light and went to bed, while I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I wasn't crying. I was calculating. I thought about every receipt, every call, every time he said, "Just friends." And I decided right then that I'd rather know the truth than live in comfort built on lies. The next morning, I called Maya. "You were right," I told her. "He's hiding something." She sighed like she'd been waiting for that call. "All right, then let's treat it like a case. Observe, document, confirm. No emotions, just facts." So I did. I noticed his shirt smelled like a mix of my detergent and someone else's perfume. He'd started shaving on weekends again, something he hadn't done since Sophie was born. He even bought new cologne, something musky, foreign, the kind you buy to feel like a new man. When I asked about the sudden changes, he said, "I just want to take better care of myself." I almost laughed. "That's great. Pity you didn't feel that way when I was begging you to see a doctor about your cholesterol." "I'm anyone." His face tightened. "Why do you always have to turn things into a fight?" I wanted to say, "Because you turned our marriage into a secret," but I didn't. Not yet. That Friday, he said he was driving to a site meeting in Salem. I nodded and wished him luck. After he left, I called the office. "Is Eric in today?" I asked the receptionist. "Oh," she said, surprised. "He took a personal day." I remember sitting there, phone still in my hand, heart pounding but calm, like a surgeon about to make the first cut. Around 7 p.m., he texted, "Heading back soon. Long day." I didn't respond. Instead, I checked the shared credit card account. A new charge had appeared. The veranda, again. 2 entrees, same wine, same total. That was enough. When he got home, I was sitting in the living room with the lamp on and the receipt on the table. He paused in the doorway, rain still dripping off his coat. "What's that?" he asked. "You tell me." End of 4. He looked down, jaw tightening. "You went through my stuff?" "You went through our marriage," I said, my voice low and steady. He tried to spin it, said it was a work dinner, that I was blowing things out of proportion. He even smiled like he could charm his way out of it. I didn't yell, didn't throw anything. I just said, You're lying. And we both know it. For the first time, he didn't answer. He just stood there, silent, dripping water on the hardwood floor. Then he walked upstairs without another word. That silence said more than any confession could. The next day, I drove Sophie to school, then stopped by a small cafe downtown. I sat in the corner with my laptop and started looking up private investigators. It felt strange, clinical, methodical, not at all like the movies. No dramatic music, just the quiet hum of a woman reclaiming control. When Maya called that evening, I told her my plan. She said, "You sure you're ready for what you might find?" I said, "I'm not ready for anything, but I'm tired of pretending I am." That night, Eric came home with flowers. Cheap ones from the grocery store, the kind wrapped in plastic. He said, "I feel like we've been distant lately. Maybe we should take a trip, just the two of us." I stared at the flowers for a long time before taking them. "That's sweet," I said. "Let's see how next week goes." End of Cree. He smiled, relieved, kissed my cheek, and went upstairs. I watched him go, the bouquet still in my hands, dripping water into the sink. I tossed it in the trash before it could even touch a vase. When I went to bed, he was already asleep. I stood there for a moment, looking at the man I thought I knew. He looked peaceful, like someone who believed his lies were safe. I lay down beside him and stared into the dark, thinking not about revenge or anger, but about clarity. Because once you see the first crack, the rest of the wall can never look whole again. The next morning felt heavier than usual. Eric sat across from me at breakfast, scrolling through his phone, pretending to read the news. I stirred my coffee, watching his reflection in the mug instead of looking at him directly. The silence between us wasn't new anymore. It had texture, weight, a kind of invisible distance that couldn't be filled with small talk. He broke it first. "You've been quiet lately," he said without looking up. I almost laughed. "You just noticed?" He sighed, still glued to his screen. "I don't know what you want me to say, Rachel. You're acting like something's wrong." "There is something wrong," I said calmly. "You're cheating on me." His hand froze mid-scroll. For a second, he looked like a man who had forgotten how to breathe. Then he put the phone down slowly and said, "That's ridiculous." I leaned forward, keeping my voice even. "The veranda receipts? The perfume? The new passcode? The lies about work trips? Should I keep going?" He rubbed the back of his neck like he was buying time. "Lauren and I are just friends. We went to college together. You're overthinking." There it was again, that word. Overthinking. The favorite insult of men who think you'll question your own sanity before you question their stories. "Eric," I said quietly, "just tell me the truth. You owe me that much." End quote. He looked down for a moment, then back up with eyes that weren't sorry, just tired. "Fine," he said. "You want the truth?" I saw Lauren again at the reunion, and it made me realize something. She never really left my heart. I blinked once, twice, waiting for the punchline that didn't come. "What?" He exhaled, like he'd been holding it in for weeks. "I thought I was happy, Rachel, but I've been lying to myself. Lauren understands me in a way you never did. I think I've found my true love." And I didn't throw my coffee or scream or make a scene. I just stared at him, trying to memorize the face of the man saying those words. "Your true love?" I repeated. "You're married. You have a daughter. You made vows." He shrugged, almost pitying. "People change." For a second, I couldn't tell if I wanted to cry or laugh. It was so absurd it almost sounded rehearsed. "People change," I said, "but apparently only you get to." Emmer 5. He pushed his chair back and stood up, suddenly full of self-righteous calm. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I can't keep living a lie." That was the part that got me, the irony. The man who lied to my face every day now, claiming to be allergic to dishonesty. "You've been living a lie," I said, "but not the one you think." He grabbed his keys, muttering something about needing air, and walked out. The sound of the door closing echoed longer than it should have. I sat there for a while, hands trembling but steady enough to pick up my phone. I texted Maya. He confessed, said Lauren is his true love. She replied instantly, "I'm so sorry. Don't react. Document everything." By evening, Eric still hadn't come home. Sophie asked where he was, and I told her he was working late. That night, I folded his clothes into boxes, not because I decided to kick him out, but because I needed to see what my life looked like without his things taking up space. When he finally returned, it was almost midnight. He smelled like hotel soap and guilt. I was sitting on the couch, lights off, TV on mute. He didn't even pretend to be sorry. He just said, "I'm staying at a friend's for a while. I think it's better for both of us." I nodded slowly. "Your friend Lauren?" He flinched, then straightened his shoulders. "Yes." There it was. The final nail hammered in with honesty that arrived too late to matter. As he packed a bag, I watched him move through the house like a stranger, trespassing in his own life. He paused by Sophie's bedroom door, looking at her sleeping face. "Tell her I love her," he said softly. "You can tell her yourself," I replied. He looked at me then, maybe hoping for forgiveness, maybe expecting rage. What he got was silence. Because some things don't deserve words. After he left, I sat on the floor of our bedroom and laughed. It wasn't joyful. It was the kind of laugh that comes when you've run out of ways to scream. I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was just empty. Around 2 a.m., I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a drink, and scrolled through old photos on my phone. There we were smiling at the beach, dancing at a wedding, holding Sophie for the first time. All moments that used to mean something. Now they just looked like evidence in a case I'd already solved. The next morning, my mother called out of habit. "How are you, sweetheart?" I opened my mouth to say, "Fine," the automatic answer, but stopped. "I think my marriage is over," I said instead. There was a pause, then a quiet, steady reply. "Then it's time to start over." I don't know why, but that line stayed with me. Not the sadness of it, but the certainty. Later that day, I walked through the house, collecting the things that were still mine. My books, my plants, the photo of Sophie on her first day of school. Everything else, the shirts, the ties, the leather jacket from the reunion, I left in a pile by the door. When Maya came by that evening, she hugged me without a word. Then she said, "You handled that better than most." I smiled faintly. You'd be surprised what calm looks like when it's covering a hurricane. That night, I didn't check my phone, didn't stalk social media, didn't look for pictures of them. Because the truth was already enough. He'd found his true love. I just didn't realize yet that love like that never lasts long when it starts with a lie. The house felt like a museum after he left, too neat, too still, like life had been vacuum sealed. For a few days, I moved around it quietly, picking up mugs he never washed, finding socks behind the couch, deleting his name from the grocery list. Grief has its own rhythm. Slow, messy, strangely practical. You cry, then you take out the trash. Sophie noticed faster than I wanted her to. One morning, she looked up from her cereal and asked, "Is Dad on another trip?" "Something like that," I said, forcing a smile. "Are you fighting again?" I hesitated. "We're taking some space. Sometimes grown-ups need to figure things out." She nodded, wise beyond 10 years, then went back to eating like she'd already known the truth but was kind enough to let me pretend. 2 weeks later, the pretending ended for everyone. A coworker sent me a link on Facebook with a hesitant text. "You might not want to see this, but you probably should." It was a photo Eric and Lauren at a wine bar downtown, sitting too close, laughing like the world owed them applause. The caption read, "Reunion couple finds their second chance at love die." There were hashtags. Number true love, number college sweethearts, number fate. Fate. That word made me laugh out loud. It wasn't fate, it was choice. The post had hundreds of likes, most from people I didn't know, but a few from friends who did. One even commented, "So happy for you both." I remembered her dancing at our wedding. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and looked at the bank account. The numbers didn't add up. Eric had withdrawn half of our savings a week before he left, nearly $25,000. He hadn't even tried to hide it. The transaction read, "Joint transfer, E. Adams, Arnsing." I called the bank the next morning. The manager, polite but firm, confirmed he'd moved the money into a new personal account. He's legally allowed to transfer within shared funds unless restricted by court order, she said. Her voice softened. I'm sorry, Mrs. Adams. Mrs. Adams. The name didn't even sound like mine anymore. When I told Maya, she didn't flinch. Get copies of every statement, every receipt, don't delete anything. And Rachel? Don't confront him yet. Let him think he's winning. So I did. I stayed quiet while he played house with his true love. Social media painted their life in warm filters, brunch photos, hiking selfies, hotel check-ins. They looked like an ad for redemption. But I knew better. 3 weeks later, Sophie came home from school crying. Someone had shown her a picture of Eric and Lauren on Instagram. She's not even that pretty, Sophie said, tears streaking her cheeks. Why did he pick her? I held her close, brushing her hair back. Sweetheart, people don't always make choices that make sense, but that's not on you. After she fell asleep, I sat in the dark and felt something shift. The sadness was still there, but underneath it was something new clarity. Betrayal stops hurting the moment you realize it says nothing about your worth and everything about theirs. The next day, I went back to work. My boss, a kind woman named Meredith, called me into her office. Take more time if you need it, she said. I don't need time, I said. I need focus. And focus is exactly what I got. Meanwhile, Eric's dream life began to show cracks. Maya, who knew someone in HR at his firm, told me the company had flagged several expense reports, meals, travel, and consulting fees, that didn't match any projects. Guess whose name showed up on the receipts? Lauren's. A week later, I received an email from the school. Tuition payment failed. The card on file was Eric's. He'd stopped paying. I called him immediately. Eric, the school called. The payment didn't go through. He sighed like I was bothering him. Things are a little tight right now. I'll handle it. Handle it? I said. You took half our savings. You left us with bills. And now you're saying you can't pay for your daughter's school? I'm working on it, he snapped. Stop making everything sound like my fault. It is your fault, I said, steady as stone. And you'll see just how much soon. He hung up. That was fine. I didn't need his words anymore. I needed his paper trail. By mid-month, Maya had helped me collect everything. The financial records, the screenshots, the emails. What used to be a marriage was now a legal portfolio. On a quiet Saturday morning, I went for a walk through Forest Park. The air was crisp, the trees still wet from overnight rain. I realized I wasn't thinking about Eric or Lauren at all. I was thinking about Sophie, about what kind of example I wanted to set for her. Revenge didn't have to look like anger. It could look like boundaries. That night, Eric showed up unannounced. I opened the door, and he looked smaller, not physically, but in presence. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes tired. I just came to see Sophie, he said. She's at my mom's, I replied. Oh, he said, awkwardly shifting his weight. Lauren and I moved in together. It's been an adjustment. I'm sure it has, I said, leaning against the doorframe. How's your adjustment fund holding up? He blinked, confused. What? Never mind, I said, smiling faintly. He stood there for a few seconds, maybe expecting an invitation inside. I didn't offer one. When he realized that, he nodded and turned away. As he walked to his car, I watched him through the window. The man who once looked unstoppable now looked like someone walking uphill in the rain. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. When I closed the curtains, it hit me that I wasn't waiting for him anymore. Not for closure, not for an apology. His true love could have him. Because what he called freedom, I now called proof that I'd been right about him all along. The following week, the house stopped feeling like a wound and started feeling like a workspace. The crying had stopped not because I'd run out of tears, but because they'd lost their purpose. Maya once told me that grief burns fast, but strategy lasts longer. I decided she was right. I woke up early, brewed coffee, and went through our shared files, passwords, emails, everything Eric thought I'd never touch. Years of managing the household meant I knew where everything lived. The mortgage account, the joint credit card, the insurance policies. The digital map of our marriage was laid out in plain sight, and for once, it was mine to navigate. By noon, I had a spreadsheet, his spending patterns, withdrawals, trips, meals, and business expenses. They painted a picture far more honest than any conversation we'd ever had. He'd been draining small amounts every month for nearly a year. A slow betrayal, not a sudden one. When I showed Maya, she whistled. He's been setting this up for a while. He didn't just cheat emotionally, he prepared for the exit. I nodded. Then we'll prepare for the aftermath. We sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by coffee cups and legal pads, building a quiet kind of war plan. Step 1. Freeze the joint line of credit. Step 2. File a financial protection notice. Step 3. Document everything. While we worked, my phone buzzed Eric's name flashing across the screen. I let it ring out. Maya smirked. You planning to call him back? No, I said. Let him wonder. That night, I lay in bed scrolling through his public social media. Every post looked like it was curated for performance. Pictures with Lauren at brunch, a caption about new beginnings. He'd always been predictable. When he felt guilty, he overshared. One post caught my eye, him in a new suit, standing in front of a glass building. The caption, big moves ahead. I zoomed in. Behind him, on the reflection of the window, I saw the company logo, Brightline Energy Partners, a small renewable energy startup based downtown. I looked it up. His LinkedIn listed him as consultant. The company website showed Lauren as the communications director. Of course, they were playing house and office. The next morning, I walked into Brightline's building under the pretense of delivering documents for a Mr. Adams. The receptionist smiled and said, "He's out for lunch, with Lauren should be back soon." End of Triton. I thanked her, left a blank envelope on the counter, and walked out with the image burned into my mind, their names together on the directory. It wasn't anger that followed me home, it was clarity. Anger wants reaction. Clarity plans response. Maya and I met again that weekend. If he's using company funds for personal expenses, she said, that's corporate misconduct. You could report it anonymously to HR. I could, I said, but I want him to see it coming just slow enough that he can't stop it. For the next few days, I played the perfect ghost. No texts, no confrontation, no visible bitterness. I sent polite one-word replies when he asked about Sophie. I sounded detached enough for him to think I was moving on. On the fourth day, he called again. "Rachel," he started, his voice tight. "Are you planning to lawyer up?" I let the silence hang before answering. "Should I?" He laughed nervously. "Come on, we can keep this civil. There's no need to drag this through courts." "I agree," I said. "No need at all." Then I hung up. That night, I drafted an email to Brightline's compliance department. The subject line was simple: misuse of corporate funds by consultant Eric Adams. The attachments included every receipt, date, and transaction connected to work dinners that matched his outings with Lauren. I didn't sign my name. Truth didn't need an introduction. After hitting send, I felt the strangest calm. It wasn't triumph, it was balance, the kind that comes when the scale finally stops tipping the wrong way. 2 days later, the fallout began. Eric texted me, "Did you say something to my company?" I stared at the screen, letting his panic soak in. Then I typed, "Why would I? I'm just taking space, remember?" He didn't reply. Later that evening, Maya dropped by with a bottle of wine. "You look peaceful," she said, pouring us each a glass. "Peaceful as new," I admitted. "It's quieter than I expected. That's because silence is louder than revenge when you do it right." We toasted to that. Sophie came home from my mom's that weekend, and the first thing she did was hug me. "You seem different," she said. "I feel different," I told her honestly. That night, while tucking her in, she whispered, "Are you mad at Dad?" I thought for a moment. "No, I'm just not protecting him anymore." After she fell asleep, I walked downstairs, opened the window, and let the cold air in. The city hummed outside, steady, indifferent, alive. Somewhere out there, Eric was realizing that his version of freedom came with invoices attached. The strange thing about betrayal is that once you survive it, you start noticing how quiet your world becomes when you stop chasing answers. I didn't need closure. I needed accountability, and I was finally getting it. I sat there a long time that night, not plotting or waiting, just breathing. The silence that used to hurt now sounded like power. The morning after his company email blew up, Eric called again. I didn't answer. Then he texted, "You went too far." I stared at the screen, coffee in hand, and smiled. Funny how people who cross every line suddenly care about boundaries when it's their turn to pay. Maya came over an hour later, already knowing what happened. "He's probably realizing HR doesn't handle these things quietly," she said. "Compliance reports always escalate." I nodded. "Good. Then we're just getting started." We spent the next few days organizing every document I had into a legal binder: financial statements, screenshots, tax filings, and all his fake business expenses. Each page felt like another brick in the wall between who I was and who I used to be. By Thursday, Maya set up a meeting with her colleague, a divorce attorney named Jenna Ward. Jenna had the kind of calm that made you feel like the storm outside was her favorite kind of weather. She flipped through my documents, one brow raised. "He's using marital funds to support another woman. That's spousal financial misconduct, which gives you leverage." "Leverage?" I asked. "In court, it means you get more than half," she said. "And depending on how much he took, we can argue restitution." I wasn't looking for revenge in dollar signs, but hearing the word restitution felt poetic. Jenna leaned back. "If you're ready, I can draft the petition this week." "Make it clean," I said. "No theatrics, just truth." As we finalized paperwork, I could almost hear Eric's voice in my head, his casual confidence, his way of calling me dramatic. Whenever I caught him lying, he'd always underestimated calm people. Calm doesn't mean weak, it means calculating. That weekend, I dropped Sophie off at my mom's, then came home to find a manila envelope slid under the front door. No return address. Inside, a handwritten note. "You're destroying my life for no reason. I made a mistake. Can't we fix this like adults?" There was no signature, but the handwriting was unmistakable. I stared at the note for a long time, the words, "for no reason," circling in my mind like an insult. I took a photo of it, placed it in my binder, then threw the original into the shredder. By Monday, Jenna had filed the divorce petition. It included a request for full custody of Sophie and financial restitution for the withdrawn savings. The court date was set for 6 weeks later. That same afternoon, my phone buzzed this time, a message from a number I didn't recognize. "HR has started an investigation into unauthorized spending. We'll be in touch." I didn't need to ask who it was from. The next day, Maya texted me. "They're auditing him. It's bad." I didn't feel joy, just quiet affirmation. When truth starts walking toward someone, it doesn't matter how fast they run, it always catches up. A week later, Eric showed up again, unannounced. This time I opened the door because I wanted to see what guilt looked like in daylight. He stood there in a wrinkled dress shirt, dark circles under his eyes. "You really did it," he said. "I told the truth," I corrected. He scoffed. "Do you know what you've done to my career?" "Probably less than what you did to your marriage." He stepped closer. "I loved you, Rachel, but we were falling apart long before Lauren. You know that. Then you should have fixed the cracks instead of building a new house on my foundation." His jaw tightened. "You always have to win, don't you?" "No," I said. "I just don't lose quietly." He stared at me for a long moment before finally saying, "You'll regret this." I smiled. "You already do enough regretting for both of us." He left without slamming the door. Progress, I guess. 2 days later, I got a call from Jenna. "Eric's company reached out," she said. "They've opened a joint investigation with the IRS. They found falsified reimbursements tied to personal trips." He blinked. "Ears?" She nodded. When corporate fraud overlaps with personal finances, it triggers a federal review. He's in serious trouble. I didn't laugh or cheer. I just whispered, "Good." And he cried. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my binder open, reading through everything I'd collected. It wasn't just a pile of evidence anymore, it was the story of how a woman learned that silence can be sharper than shouting. I thought about how he'd accused me of overreacting, of making drama. But the truth was never dramatic. It was just patient. It waited for him to hand me every piece I needed. When Maya called later that night, she asked how I felt. Strangely calm, I said. That's what justice feels like, she replied. The next morning, I dropped Sophie at school and decided to take a walk by the waterfront. The air smelled like rain and salt, the sky flat gray. I watched seagulls fighting over a sandwich wrapper and thought about how messy survival can look from the outside. People don't always see the dignity in quiet endurance. They just see the debris after the storm. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from an unknown number. I'm sorry. You were right about everything. I didn't need to ask who it was from. I didn't reply either. Some apologies arrive only to make the guilty feel lighter. Mine wasn't meant to carry that weight. When I got home, I folded the binder shut, placed it neatly on the shelf, and exhaled. The war was already over. I just hadn't stopped standing yet. Outside, the rain started again, tapping against the window like a metronome. It didn't sound sad anymore. It sounded steady. It started quietly. A Monday morning, cloudy sky, the usual Portland drizzle. I was making Sophie's lunch when my phone started buzzing nonstop. At first, I ignored emails, probably. But then I saw the subject lines: Frontier Solar Investigation, Consultant Misconduct Allegations, Media Inquiry. I froze. He worked at Frontier Solar before leaving to consult. My hands shook slightly as I opened the first email. A news alert. Frontier Solar confirms internal audit into former executive Eric Adams for misuse of company funds. The article included a blurry photo of him and Lauren walking into a building, both avoiding the camera. The reporter quoted an anonymous source saying, "Company funds may have been used for personal travel and entertainment." My coffee went cold before I even took a sip. Within hours, social media caught fire. The same people who'd once liked their true love posts were now posting snake emojis and sarcastic comments. Karma moves fast when you fund your girlfriend's lifestyle with corporate money. I didn't repost, didn't comment. I didn't need to. Silence was already saying everything for me. At noon, Maya called. "You've seen the news?" "I have. HR must have leaked it. Probably to protect themselves before the feds get involved." I didn't ask how she knew. Maya always knew. By afternoon, Eric called me. I picked up this time. "Rachel, listen," he started, voice unsteady. "You need to tell them I didn't take anything. They're twisting everything." "I'm not telling them anything," I said calmly. "You made those choices." "I was trying to build something new," he shouted. "With stolen money?" His silence was answer enough. He tried again, his tone desperate now. "You think you're better than me, huh? You think you won?" "I didn't win anything," I said. "You just lost all by yourself." He hung up. That night, Sophie asked why people online were saying mean things about her dad. I sat beside her on the couch, the glow of the TV soft against her face. "Sometimes when people make mistakes, the truth becomes public," I said gently, "and that can hurt. But it's not our fault." She nodded, eyes big and sad. "I wish he'd just told the truth." "Me too," I whispered. 2 days later, Eric's company email was suspended. The HR department released an official statement to the press confirming his termination. Lauren's name appeared too, communications director placed on indefinite leave pending investigation. By Thursday, the local paper printed the headline in bold, "Love and Lies, the corporate scandal behind Frontier Solar's former executive." I didn't read the full article. I didn't have to. I'd lived it. But what I didn't expect was how people started treating me differently. At the grocery store, a woman I barely knew stopped me. "You're Rachel, right? You're handling this with such grace. I'd have burned the house down." I smiled politely. Fire wasn't necessary. That weekend, I attended Sophie's school fundraiser. The same parents who used to whisper behind my back were suddenly friendly again. "You must feel vindicated," one said, pouring wine into my cup. "I feel relieved," I replied. Vindication is just another kind of noise. Later that evening, when Sophie fell asleep, I went online and searched Eric's name. The results were brutal articles, Reddit threads, LinkedIn debates. His career, once so polished, was now a cautionary tale. Maya texted, "He's officially blacklisted. Every renewable company in Oregon knows." "How do you know that?" I typed. Because one of them just called me to confirm if I'd represent you if this turns into a deposition. I laughed quietly. He wanted a clean break, I said aloud to no one. He got it. 3 days later, I received a certified letter from Eric's lawyer. A weak attempt at intimidation claims that I'd damaged his reputation and interfered with his employment. Jenna reviewed it, smirked, and slid it back across the table. Empty threat, she said. He's trying to scare you into backing down. It's not going to work. It never did, I said. A week passed. The media storm began to fade, replaced by newer scandals. But the internet never really forgets. His face still lived in cached pages, screenshots, and hashtags that refused to die. Then, out of nowhere, an envelope arrived at my doorstep. No return address, but I knew the handwriting before I even picked it up. Inside was a check $7,000 and a note. For Sophie's school. I can't change everything, but maybe I can start here. I didn't cash it. I kept it in a drawer, a reminder that regret without accountability is just decoration. That evening, I met Maya at our favorite dinner. She raised an eyebrow as I told her. 7,000? After he siphoned 70? I nodded. He's learning math backward. We both laughed, the kind of tired laugh that comes after surviving something ugly and absurd. On my drive home, I passed the park where Eric and I once took Sophie on weekends. For a brief moment, I saw us there again, the old version of us, before lies became currency. Then the image faded. When I got home, I made tea, sat by the window, and looked out at the streetlights flickering against the rain. It wasn't peace yet, but it was close. The kind that comes when the world finally knows what you've known all along. And somewhere, in a small apartment he probably couldn't afford anymore, I imagined Eric scrolling through his own headlines, realizing that the empire he built on secrets had crumbled faster than he thought possible. That thought didn't make me smile out of cruelty, it made me smile out of closure. Because when truth finally speaks, it doesn't shout. It just doesn't stop echoing. It had been 3 months since his name disappeared from the headlines, but some messes take longer to fade than ink. Life at home had settled into a rhythm again: quiet mornings, steady work, dinners with Sophie, laughter that didn't feel forced anymore. I'd even started sleeping through the night. That peace didn't last long. One Thursday afternoon, as I was watering the plants on the porch, a car I didn't recognize pulled up in front of the house. A silver sedan, older than the ones he used to drive. The door opened, and there he was, Eric, looking nothing like the man who once lectured me about appearances. His hair was longer, unkempt. The crisp confidence he'd worn like armor was gone. He waved awkwardly, like a kid approaching the teacher he'd disappointed. "Rachel," he said, voice uncertain. I didn't move. "What do you need?" He shoved his hands into his pockets, avoiding my eyes. "Can we talk? Just for a minute." I hesitated, then stepped aside. He walked in slowly, glancing around like he was visiting a museum of his old life. Everything looked the same except him. He sat at the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees. "I owe you an apology," he began. "For everything. For what I did to you, to Sophie, to myself." I crossed my arms. "You already said you found your true love. How's that going?" He looked down, lips tightening. "She left." I waited. "She said she couldn't handle the attention," he continued, voice flat. "After the investigation, the company blacklisted me. No one wants to hire someone with my name right now. She said she needed stability." "And that wasn't you," I said softly. He gave a hollow laugh. "Apparently not." Silence filled the room, heavy but calm. I watched him fidget with his hands, the same hands that once signed my name on joint accounts and then drained them without flinching. "I lost everything," he said finally. "The condo, the car, even my consulting license. I'm staying with a friend now, and He stopped, swallowing hard. "I miss Sophie." I nodded slowly. "She misses who you were, not who you became." He looked up at me, eyes wet. "I deserve that." "Yes," I said simply. He exhaled. "You were right about everything. About her, about me." I didn't respond. Sometimes silence is the only language worth speaking in moments like that. He leaned forward, desperation flickering through his voice. "Rachel, I don't expect forgiveness. I just want a chance to make things right." "You can't rewrite what you've already published," I said. "All you can do is stop printing lies." He nodded, staring at the floor. "I've been going to therapy, trying to figure out why I do things that ruin good things." "That's a start," I said. "But therapy doesn't erase consequences." He flinched, but didn't argue. Then came the question I knew was coming. "Would you ever consider giving us another chance?" I didn't laugh, didn't cry. I just looked at him, this man who had once promised forever and traded it for flattery, and a woman who reminded him of his youth. "Eric," I said quietly, "you didn't just break a marriage, you broke trust. And trust doesn't get patched up like drywall." He nodded, but his shoulders slumped, like the weight of his choices had finally settled in. "I understand," he murmured. After a long pause, he stood. "Can I see Sophie sometime? Maybe this weekend?" "I'll talk to her," I said. "She'll decide." He seemed surprised but grateful. "Thank you," he whispered. As he walked toward the door, he stopped and turned around. "You look happy," he said softly. "I am," I replied. "And it has nothing to do with you." When he left, I stood by the window and watched him get into the car. He sat there for a few seconds before starting the engine. The rain began again, light at first, then steady, the kind that soaks you slowly. He didn't move right away. Maybe he was remembering all the times I waited for him in that same rain. Later that night, Sophie came home from piano practice. "Dad texted me," she said carefully. I looked up from the stove. "What did he say?" "That he wants to see me. Said he's sorry." "And how do you feel about that?" She shrugged. "I want to see him. But I don't want him to lie again." You have every right to want that," I said. She nodded, then asked, "Are you mad?" "No," I said, stirring the soup. "I'm just done." That weekend, Eric came by to pick her up. He was punctual, polite, trying too hard. Sophie hugged him, but didn't let go easily. When they drove off, I felt something unexpected. Not fear, not anger, not even sadness. Just release. Maya called that evening. "So, how did it go?" "He's broke, alone, and suddenly self-aware," I said. She chuckled. "Classic redemption arc. Except I'm not the audience," I said. When Sophie came back later, she climbed onto the couch beside me. "He cried," she said softly. "I think he finally gets it." "Maybe," I said, wrapping an arm around her. "But getting it isn't the same as changing it." She rested her head on my shoulder. "You're not taking him back, right?" I smiled. "No, sweetheart. Some doors close for a reason, and if to well." Outside, the rain kept falling, but this time it sounded different. Not like mourning, but like cleansing. I didn't feel like the woman he betrayed anymore. I felt like the woman who survived it and built something better from the wreckage. And somewhere in the distance, I hoped he was finally learning that true love means nothing if it comes at the cost of truth. After that last meeting with Eric, something shifted in me. For the first time in years, my thoughts weren't orbiting around what he had done, or what he might still do. The air in the house felt lighter, like I'd finally opened a window that had been shut for too long. I started waking up before dawn, not because I couldn't sleep, but because I wanted to. I'd make coffee, open my laptop, and dive into something that had been buried under years of emotional debris, my own ambition. Maya was the one who nudged me. "You're sitting on experience most people would pay to learn from," she said. "Why not use it?" At first, I didn't know what she meant. "Use it how?" "Finance," she said. "Budgeting, divorce settlements, everything you learned the hard way, teach it. Help other women avoid what you went through." The idea sat with me for days. Then one morning, while scrolling through Sophie's homework portal, I saw an ad for a local women's business incubator. "Turn your skills into empowerment." I signed up without thinking twice. The first meeting was in a shared workspace downtown, filled with mismatched chairs, bad coffee, and women who looked like they'd rebuilt themselves from scratch. Some wore suits, others wore exhaustion. But their energy was magnetic, fierce, steady, unapologetic. When it was my turn to speak, I introduced myself simply. "I'm Rachel Adams," I said, And I'm starting over. The woman next to me smiled knowingly. Aren't we all? That night, I came home with a plan. Not just to rebuild, but to reclaim. By the end of the month, Harbor Point Financial Coaching was more than just a folder on my desktop. It was a registered business. I rented a small office near the river. Nothing fancy, just one desk, 2 chairs, and a framed quote that Maya gave me. You don't heal by forgetting, you heal by rebuilding. Of none. My first client came through a referral from the incubator, a woman named Lisa, who was going through a messy divorce with a husband who'd hidden credit card debt under her name. She sat across from me, eyes red, hands shaking. I feel stupid, she said. I leaned forward. You're not stupid. You're just in a story that wasn't written by you yet. By the time she left, she'd stopped shaking. She even smiled. That was the moment I realized what peace actually looked like. It wasn't silence or distance or forgiveness. It was purpose. Word spread fast. Women started coming to me for help, not just with numbers, but with confidence. They brought bank statements, questions, and sometimes tears. I didn't need to advertise. Pain has its own network. One evening, after finishing a late session, I locked up and stood by the window of my tiny office. The reflection looking back wasn't the same woman who once begged her husband to explain a receipt. This one stood straighter, calmer. She didn't need anyone's permission to exist. A few weeks later, the local newspaper ran a small article about Harbor Point. It was buried in the community section, but the headline made me smile. Divorce survivor helps women find financial freedom. Maya texted a photo of the article with a simple message. Told you. Around that same time, Sophie started noticing the changes too. You're always smiling now, she said one night while we were folding laundry. I'm just happy, I told her. That's allowed, right? She laughed. It's about time. Her grades went up. Her laughter came back. The tension that used to hang between us had disappeared, replaced by something softer, mutual healing. Then, one afternoon, as I was preparing for a client call, I got an email from a local community college. They wanted me to give a guest lecture for their Women in Finance Week. I almost deleted it, thinking it must have been a mistake. Then I saw the name of the sender, Meredith, my old boss. Her message read, I've watched what you've built. I think students could learn from your story. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. My story, something that had once felt like a scar, had turned into a credential. The day of the lecture, I stood in front of 30 students and told them about risk, control, and trust. Not just in money, but in people. Protect your assets, I said. But don't confuse love with liability. When it was over, a young woman came up to me and said, That's the first time anyone talked about finance and heartbreak in the same sentence. It actually made sense. I smiled. They usually belong in the same budget. Oh, sit. On the drive home, the sun dipped low over the Willamette River, painting everything gold. It felt like a quiet applause from the universe. That evening, Maya came over for dinner. She brought takeout and a bottle of wine. You're becoming the face of practical revenge, she teased. Revenge? I laughed. No, just reinvestment. She raised her glass. To Harbor Point, and to women who turned betrayal into a business plan. We clinked glasses, the sound sharp and satisfying. Later that night, after Sophie went to bed, I sat on the porch, laptop open, drafting the final version of Harbor Point's website. Under About Me, I typed, I help women rebuild after financial betrayal, because freedom isn't revenge, it's security, clarity, and peace. I stared at the sentence for a while, then hit save. Out of habit, I checked my phone. A text from an unknown number lit up the screen. Saw your article. You've come a long way. I'm proud of you. I didn't need to ask who it was from. I just turned off the phone, leaned back, and let the night fill the silence he used to occupy. Because some messages don't need replies, especially when your life has already answered them. A few months after Harbor Point began thriving, I received a text that felt like a ghost knocking on my door. Can we talk? Just once. I need to say this in person. No name, but I didn't need one. Some words carry a fingerprint. For a few minutes, I stared at the screen, considering whether to ignore it. Then I typed back, You can stop by tomorrow at 6. That's all. The next day, he showed up on time. His car was older, like him. His posture had changed, slouched, uncertain, like someone trying to disappear into himself. When he stepped inside, he looked around at the house. Everything was different now. New photos, new energy, no ghosts of our old life. "You've redecorated," he said softly. I reclaimed. I corrected. He sat on the couch, holding a small envelope. I stayed standing. "Rachel," he began, "I don't even know where to start. I lost everything, my job, my savings, most of my friends. But the hardest thing to lose was the version of myself that existed when I was with you." I folded my arms. That version cheated, lied, and called me dramatic when I asked questions. "You didn't lose him. You created him." He nodded slowly, eyes down. "You're right. I can't change that. I wake up every day and wish I'd stayed. That I'd never gone to that reunion." "That reunion didn't ruin us," I said. "Your choices did." He looked up, eyes glassy. "I thought I was chasing happiness. Turns out I was running away from accountability." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He handed me the envelope. "I wrote you a letter. I didn't want to text it. I needed you to read it the way I wrote it. I didn't open it. You can say what you need to say, but I'm not promising I'll respond." He exhaled, shaky. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I didn't realize it until I ruined it." I gave a small nod. That's usually how lessons work. He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I know you probably hate me." "I don't," I said simply. "Hate's still a kind of attachment. You're not part of my emotional budget anymore." He blinked, unsure if I was serious or sarcastic. "Maybe both." "Do you ever think we could have fixed it?" he asked quietly. I took a deep breath. "No. Because the moment you made me question my own worth, the foundation cracked. You can't rebuild trust on a floor that's already sinking." He looked down at his hands, silent for a while. Then, in a smaller voice, "Do you ever miss me?" I thought about it. The truth surprised me. "Sometimes," I said, "but not you. Just the version of me who still believed in you." He nodded slowly, tears starting to form. "I deserve that." He sat there for a few more seconds, then said, "You've changed. You're peaceful." "That's what happens when the noise leaves," I said. He smiled faintly, then stood up. "I'm happy for you, Rachel. I mean that." I didn't say thank you. Some blessings sound like damage control. He started walking toward the door, then paused. "If you ever need anything..." I cut him off gently. "I already have everything I need." He hesitated, then nodded and left. When the door clicked shut, I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The quiet that followed didn't feel empty. It felt earned. The letter sat on the table for 2 days before I finally opened it. It wasn't long, just 2 pages of regret, apologies, and what-ifs. The last line said, "If there's ever a version of me worthy of your forgiveness, I hope he finds you someday." End of chapter. I folded the letter neatly, placed it back in the envelope, and tucked it into a box in my closet, the same box that held old photos, Sophie's first drawings, and a few things I wasn't ready to throw away, but didn't need to see either. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the porch while Sophie worked on her school project inside. The air smelled like rain and cut grass. Somewhere down the street, a wind chime played a slow, familiar song. For the first time, I didn't replay the past in my head. I didn't wonder what might have been. I just existed in that moment, calm, certain, untethered. When Sophie came out to sit beside me, she asked, "Mom, do you still love Dad?" I thought about my answer carefully. I love the parts of him that helped me become who I am, but I don't want him back in my life. She nodded. "That makes sense." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "You're not mad at him anymore?" "No," I said softly. "I'm just done carrying the weight of his mistakes." We sat there quietly, watching the sun fade behind the houses across the street. I realized I hadn't felt that kind of stillness in years. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't victory. It was peace, the kind that comes when you stop needing closure from the person who broke you. Because forgiveness doesn't mean letting them back in. Sometimes it just means letting them go completely. The weeks after his visit passed quietly. like the sound after thunder fades. I didn't replay his apology anymore. I didn't even think about what it meant. The truth was simple. Peace isn't something someone gives you. It's what you build once you stop giving your energy to people who never deserved it. Life slipped into something steady again. I'd drop Sophie off at school, grab coffee from the corner cafe where the barista already knew my order, then head to my office. Harbor Point had grown 3 more clients, 1 new assistant, and a waiting list of women who wanted to learn how to reclaim their financial footing. One of them, a teacher named Sandra, told me, "You talk about money the way therapists talk about feelings." I laughed. Maybe because they're both about control, who had it, who lost it, and who's taking it back. In a strange way, helping these women gave me what my marriage never did, meaning. The more stories I heard, the more I realized betrayal wasn't unique, it was universal. The names changed, the details shifted, but the pattern was the same. Trust given too freely, truth discovered too late, dignity restored only by strength. I'd become an expert in quiet comebacks. That spring, the community college invited me back for another lecture. This time, they paid me and added my session to their professional development series. The auditorium wasn't large, but it was full. I looked out at the faces, students, teachers, a few curious men, and felt a strange calm. I began not with a story, but a statement. Justice doesn't need noise, I said. It just needs truth, consistency, and a little patience. The audience went silent in that way. That means you've hit something real. After the talk, a student approached me, a girl maybe 22, clutching her notebook like a shield. "You said betrayal can be fuel," she said softly. "Does that mean I'm supposed to thank the person who hurt me?" I smiled. "No, but you can thank yourself for surviving it." That evening, I drove home along the Willamette, windows down, the city lights flickering on the water. For once, I didn't feel haunted by what had been taken from me. I felt proud of what I'd built from the ruins. At home, Sophie was sitting at the table working on a report. "Guess what?" she said, grinning. "I got an A on my project about entrepreneurship." I smiled. "Really? What was it about?" "About you," she said, giggling. "I called it Harbor Point. From heartbreak to business breakthrough." I couldn't help laughing. "That's catchy. You might have just named my book." She tilted her head. "Would you ever write one?" "Maybe someday," I said. "But for now, I like living the story instead of publishing it." It was a good night. A simple one. Dinner, laughter, dishes clinking softly in the sink. The kind of night that used to feel ordinary until it didn't. Now, I treasured every quiet second. A few days later, I ran into someone unexpected at the farmer's market, Lauren. She looked thinner, tired, her hair darker than I remembered. She froze when she saw me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she walked over. "Rachel," she said, voice trembling slightly. "You look good." "You too," I said. It wasn't true, but it was polite. She nodded awkwardly. "I heard about your business. You're helping women? That's really great." "Thank you." There was a pause heavy enough to split the air between us. Then she said quietly, "I lost everything too." I nodded slowly. Sometimes that's how people learn what everything really was. She blinked, maybe fighting back tears, then whispered, "I'm sorry." I believed her. But I didn't need it. "I hope you find your peace, Lauren," I said, and meant it. As I walked away, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. Her apology didn't rewrite anything. It just confirmed what I already knew. I'd won the quiet war by walking away without bitterness. That evening, Maya stopped by with her usual dramatic entrance, loud knock, louder laughter. "You are officially the most stable divorced woman I know," she joked. "I'll take that as a compliment," I said. She poured herself a glass of wine and flopped on the couch. "So, what's next for Rachel Adams, Peace Ambassador of Portland?" I thought for a moment. "More life, less drama." She raised her glass. "To that." Later, after she left, I stepped outside. The night was cool, the city hummed soft and distant. I stood there barefoot on the porch, looking at the stars between the clouds. Somewhere, I imagined, Eric was still trying to rebuild. I didn't wish him ill. I didn't wish him anything. That's what peace really feels like. Nothing to prove, nothing to chase, nothing left to fix. Inside, Sophie's laughter echoed from her room. I turned off the porch light and went in, feeling a sense of closure that didn't need words or witnesses. Because when the storm finally ends, you don't clap for the silence, you just breathe it in. A year later, life didn't feel like a comeback, it just felt normal again, which turned out to be the sweetest victory of all. The kind of normal where mornings smelled like coffee instead of tension, where the sound of the dishwasher replaced arguments, and where I could finally look at my reflection and recognize the woman staring back. Harbor Point had grown beyond what I ever imagined. We weren't just helping women rebuild finances anymore. We were rebuilding confidence, one story at a time. Some days, the waiting room looked like a quiet protest, women from every age and background, all learning that being left doesn't mean being lost. On a gray Tuesday morning, I received an invitation that made me pause. It was from the Women's Business Collective of Oregon. They were hosting a statewide conference on financial independence and wanted me as their keynote speaker. The title they gave me was poetic in a way, Rebuilding Peace After Betrayal. I laughed when I read it. A year ago, I wouldn't have been able to say those words without shaking. Now, they felt like armor. The night before the event, Sophie sat on the couch next to me, reviewing my slides like a tiny PR manager. "You should add a joke," she said. "People like you better when you're funny." I smirked. "Oh, really? Got any suggestions?" She nodded seriously. "Yeah. Tell them that you learned about financial red flags from marriage." I burst out laughing. "I'll think about it, Oliberry." The next morning, the auditorium was packed. Women filled every seat, teachers, lawyers, nurses, single moms, even retirees clutching notebooks like they were starting life over. When I walked up to the podium, the applause was warm, not loud. It sounded like understanding. I began with something simple. When I first heard the phrase, true love, I thought it meant forever. Now I know it just means honesty, starting with yourself. People smiled, nodded. I told them about Harbor Point, about learning the hard way that betrayal can either destroy you or redefine you. When my husband left me, I said, I thought I lost everything, but what I really lost were illusions. And once those were gone, I could finally see clearly enough to rebuild. There were tears in the audience, a few knowing laughs, and a silence that felt like solidarity. I didn't talk about Eric's name or his downfall. He wasn't the story anymore. The story was what came after the rebuilding, the rebirth, the small, unglamorous moments where I learned that peace is louder than revenge if you know how to listen. When I finished, the audience stood up. Not the kind of standing ovation you see in movies, but the quiet, heartfelt kind where people stand because they feel seen. Afterward, a woman approached me with a trembling smile. "You probably don't remember me," she said. "You helped me last year. My husband drained our savings. I was lost. But now I'm debt-free, and I started my own bookkeeping business." I hugged her. "You did the hard part. I just reminded you it was possible." That night, after the event, I got home exhausted but fulfilled. Sophie had made dinner, mac and cheese, and burnt garlic bread, but I ate it like it was a feast. When we finished, she handed me a small wrapped box. "It's not your birthday," I said, smiling. "I know," she said. "It's your peace day." I pow-in. Inside was a tiny silver bracelet engraved with one word, enough. She grinned. "Because you are." I hugged her tightly, tears catching me off guard. That was the kind of revenge that mattered, not seeing him fail, but knowing I'd succeeded anyway. Later that week, I stopped by a coffee shop downtown before heading to a client meeting. As I stood in line, I heard a familiar voice behind me. I turned, and there he was. Eric. He looked older, tired, like life had been teaching him lessons I no longer needed to witness. He froze for a moment, then managed a small, polite smile. "Rachel." "Eric," I said, just as calmly. He gestured awkwardly toward my wrist. "You look happy." "I am." He nodded. "That's good. You deserve that." I didn't ask how he was. I didn't need to. Everything about him, his cheap watch, his hesitant tone, the way he avoided eye contact already said it. When my order came up, I took the cup, said, "Take care," and walked out. No bitterness, no dramatic goodbye, just peace. As I stepped outside, the cool air hit my face, and I smiled. Not the kind of smile you fake for photos, but the kind that happens when you realize you've made it through every version of yourself that almost didn't. That weekend, I took Sophie hiking along the Columbia River Gorge. We reached the overlook just as the sun started setting orange light spilling across the cliffs, water glowing like glass. She sat beside me, quiet for a while, then said, "You're really happy, huh?" "I am," I said. "Finally." She grinned. "You think Dad's happy?" I thought about it, then shrugged. "I hope he finds his peace too, but that's not my story to fix." She nodded like she understood more than I expected. We sat there, watching the sky change colors, the wind lifting her hair. For the first time, I realized that revenge wasn't what I'd done, it was what I'd become, a woman who didn't need to win, because she'd already stopped losing. When we drove home, I glanced in the rearview mirror and caught a glimpse of myself calm, steady, alive. The kind of woman who didn't break when the storm came, but learned how to build a house in the rain. Because the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's peace that stays when everything else leaves. If you love cheating stories, revenge stories, and real tales of husband betrayal that end with quiet strength instead of chaos, make sure you subscribe and leave a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from because every story like this reminds someone out there they're not alone.